You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
So I wanted to start this morning and just talk a little bit about Huntsville, Alabama. That's sort of our home base. Now, we know we have a lot of listeners from across the world, across the country. But Huntsville, Alabama has been struggling as of late to deal with criminal justice. And we talked a couple weeks ago about the massive protests we had in the summer, which were met with CS gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets. And we talked a little bit about the advisory committee's report and the lack of real response from our city council and our mayor. The city did have its promised work session after that report was revealed, where they talked quite a bit. Can't say there's been a ton of solutions to come out of that talking, and hopefully our friend Chad's going to call in and tell us a little bit more about that. And just this week, the biggest thing really is we had a Huntsville police officer who was found guilty of murder just yesterday. And, you know, that's a pretty historic thing, first of all, for the fact that he even was brought up on charges, quite frankly, is a little surprising.
Yeah, well, I mean, he basically executed the guy in cold blood. I mean, they didn't have any choice.
Yeah, my understanding of the case, and you know, I wasn't there, I wasn't on the jury by any means, but my understanding of this case is that you had a gentleman named Jeffrey Parker who was suicidal. He was holding a gun to his head. It's my understanding actually it was a flare gun. It was not an actual handgun. His family called the police for help, as you often do when you have a family member in crisis, though I think more of us are learning how dangerous that can be.
Yeah.
So the police showed up to this house, and you had two veteran officers who were trying to de-escalate the situation.
And doing a good job.
Doing a good job,
I might add.
Yes, doing what we all would like our officers to do.
Yeah.
I believe it was a seasoned black woman officer who was actually kind of handling the scene. Well, in rushes Officer Darby. He shows up, busts into the house with a shotgun, and within less than 1 minute, blew off the head of this suicidal man.
Yeah.
And not surprisingly, the Huntsville police had actually cleared him of any wrongdoing. It was actually later that the district attorney did bring him up on charges. Now, the rumor mill is that was in part because the body cam footage and how damning it was, and the other part was that the other officers on the scene were very adamant that there was wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And they were willing to testify to that effect.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, neither of those officers are still with the force, which is, you know, unfortunately what we see so often when, you know, a police officer is trying to do the right thing and they violate that thin blue line, that code among officers, and they actually try to represent the people, and, you know, they are often chased out of the force.
It's unfortunate. It's just extremely unfortunate that you had two officers on the scene that were doing good work, and they're no longer employed. You know, right. I mean, that really speaks to the justice system in general.
And honestly, I'm scared for those two officers. I worry about them. They did the right thing for the people, and you know, it's unfortunate that so often in our society, doing the right thing for the people puts you at risk.
Yep.
Of retaliation in various ways. So we actually had this trial ongoing this week, and after body cam footage, after testimonies, after deliberation, a jury of his peers convicted Officer Darby of murder. Somewhat surprising, a pleasant surprise really, to see some accountability. It's not going to bring Mr. Parker back, but it is nice to see the criminal justice system work as it's supposed to for a change. We've all heard about Officer Chauvin's trial, of course, up in Minnesota. And unfortunately, there are so many of these cases of police violence that have really dominated the news lately. So we wanted to make sure people knew that we have a similar situation right here in Huntsville, Alabama.
What was even more surprising to me was your illustrious mayor's response to the conviction of supporting a murderer. You know, I mean, he basically come out in 100% support of a murderer, and I was just sitting there looking at that and thought, I don't know, man. I don't get that whole. I don't get it. I can't see it.
You know, I thought that there was no way I could have less respect for the mayor of this city, Mayor Tear Gas Tommy Battle, but I do, because as David alluded to, immediately after the verdict, Huntsville Mayor Tommy Battle released a statement, which typically, the politicians say they can't comment on ongoing litigation or matters of litigation. So I want to quote from Mayor Battle. This is a direct quote from his statement immediately after a guilty verdict. Quote, "While I respect the jury's opinion, I disagree with the verdict. We recognize this was a hard case with a lot of technical information to process. Officer Darby followed the appropriate safety protocols in his response on the scene. He was doing what he was trained to do in the line of duty. Fortunately, Officer Darby has the same appeal rights as any other citizen and is entitled to exercise those rights."
Yeah, and that really speaks to, here is the issue that I have with this whole thing is I don't doubt Mayor Battles. I don't doubt that he wasn't doing what he was trained to do. I'm beginning to question the training.
Right.
That, if your immediate response to someone that is suicidal, it's not like this was an unknown situation where they were going in and there was a possibility of some type of ambush.
Right. He never pointed any weapon at anyone else but himself.
Yeah, they had police on the scene that were handling it. It went out over 911 that it was a suicidal situation. And if your training is to shoot somebody in that situation, then there should be some reform to that system. And the fact that Mayor Battles is saying he was doing what he was trained to do speaks to why there are people that are extremely frustrated with the system right now.
Yeah, I mean, what the mayor said, in other words, is we asked him to do this. We train officers to go in to a situation where someone is suicidal, and we go ahead and just kill them.
Yeah.
Don't worry about killing yourself. We'll take care of that for you. We'll blow your head off. No need for you to commit suicide. That's insane that the mayor is talking about this and insulting the jury. It's not their opinion, it's their verdict.
Yeah.
And I noticed he used that word opinion.
Yep.
So
we got Chad. He called in, so we got about 15 more minutes left in this segment. Seconds left in this segment, and we'll bring him on the other
so we're going to talk a little bit more about the mayor's statement, the Huntsville police chief statement, and a little bit more about what's going to happen with this case on the other side.
Yep. Folks, you're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Hang around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Put her there, boy, and we'll show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us on the Valley Labor Report this morning. We were talking a little bit about a case here in Huntsville, Alabama. We have a police officer who was found guilty yesterday of murder. We have a local activist, Chavez, who wants to call in and tell us a little bit more about this case. He's been following this issue along with other criminal justice reform issues in the city of Huntsville. So we're glad to have him calling in and sharing a little bit of expertise. We talked about the Mayor Tommy Battle's statement. Police Chief McMurray also put out a statement we can talk about with Chad. And I wanted to just emphasize why this is important. And the labor movement really our key mantra is an injury to one is an injury to all.
Yeah.
And to me, that's not just a slogan. That's a spiritual understanding.
Yeah, that's something that we live by.
And when people are victimized by the police, that is an injury to all of us as working class people.
Yeah.
When people are struggling with mental illness and they're met with violence instead of health care, that is an injury to all of the working class. So that's why it's important to me and why it's important to all of us and all of you listening. So, David, we have Chad on the line.
Yep. Good morning, Chad.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Chad, can you hear me this morning?
I can hear you great.
Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us. On the other side of the break, we mentioned the case just in brief summary, and we did read Mayor Battle's statement. So first, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you've been following these issues in Huntsville.
My name's Chad Chavez. I have been involved in political campaigns, since I was 18, been volunteering or working, doing that kind of stuff. But over the past year, I've been involved with the Citizens Coalition for Justice Reform, doing advocacy work in Huntsville for, criminal justice reform. We started with the protest in June. And since then have really been attending, every council meeting, working with city officials to try to put some new reforms into place, because I think what Darby and the incidents of June 1st and June 3rd have really shown is that, Huntsville Police Department is kind of falling behind in reforms.
Right. And as David alluded to, I mean, if you're saying Darby acted according to training, well, holy crap, we have a training problem. Because if you're training officers to do something that's going to get you convicted of murder, well, hell, that's not fair to anybody.
Yeah, I was glad to hear you guys talking about that, because that's been Mayor Battle and Chief McMurray's defense for a while. But even during the trial, Captain McCarver was on the stand saying that this is how they train people. And I think that if you're training people to fire upon people in mental health crisis because they don't drop the gun, but they aren't pointing it at you, that's a dangerous precedent. And I think we should question the wisdom of sending them out to mental health calls if that's the training.
Yeah, well, and it also speaks to the fact that if this is your training and this officer just committed murder and was convicted of murder, then there are some accomplices there that we may need to start considering. If you're training these officers to do this and they're risking their freedom to do what you've told them to do, then in my opinion, Mayor Battles, you're an accomplice to this crime, and it's something the district attorney needs to be looking into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's not fair to the citizens of Huntsville, and it's not fair to Huntsville police to know that either they risk reprimand, like the two officers that were on the scene with Darby, or they risk these charges. We definitely need to take a look at this training because it's setting officers up for failure in addition to the citizens of Huntsville.
So, Chad, has there been any actual talk of changing the training of Huntsville police? I mean, we've talked a lot about these issues with training, and now they're bringing this up even in the context of this case yesterday. But has there been any discussion from the mayor, the chief, the council? How do they plan to address this?
So the biggest reform that we've seen offered came from Council Member Francis Akridge, who has asked the police department to essentially start studying the possibility of adding full mental health workers to the teams that would respond to crises like this. The concerning part is that, that study is going to take a while. The police department has been very upfront about how slow that's going to be. So it could be still, months or years before we see anything from that. But that's the most concrete. Given what we've seen from Mayor Battle and Chief McMurray, I also worry that they don't have a lot of incentive to put that into place.
No, that's the problem.
But hopefully the verdict yesterday will jumpstart a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because I'm friends with a lot of mental health workers. My sister personally is a mental health worker, and these people deal with these type of issues every day, and we need those people involved on these call outs. I mean, yeah, you need the police there for support, but the police are not trained properly and professionally in dealing with mental health crises. And
clearly, I mean, they're admitting it.
Yeah. There's really.
They're justifying it.
Yeah. They don't even have to. You're trained with a gun and pepper spray. You're not trained to deal with people and I'm not saying that they're not trained at all. I'm sure there's they touch on mental health issues in the police department, but they're not trained at the level that a counselor or a psychologist would be to de-escalate a situation like that. And to even say this is going to be a long ongoing process is asinine, because it shouldn't be. There should be some mental health workers that are tied to that department or even to the fire department, who most of us trust so much more because they're not carrying guns, to where they get called out on these issues and have the ability to save someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the danger of a review that takes years is that we've seen multiple people in the past 6 months in Huntsville killed in mental health crisis. Whether you're talking about Bradley Pugh. The longer we spend on this, dragging our feet, the more risk it is to citizens. It's not fair to the police officer.
All right, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. We have our friend Chad on the line. We were talking a little bit about training issues in Huntsville police and some of the broader criminal justice issues we have here in the Huntsville community. So, Chad, you still with us?
Yep, still here.
All right. So when we left off, you talked about how there has been some talk of training, particularly, adding mental health workers to these kind of calls. But the fear is that this could get dragged out, delayed. They have to talking about discussing it and analyzing it before they implement it. And people could suffer in the meantime. And
let's be clear. It's not for lack of funding. The police are funded extremely well in Huntsville. I can't remember the numbers, but it's an insane amount of money that goes to police in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but compared to cities our size, we're in the top 10% of spending on police. So there's no shortage of money already. The concern about training is we really need the mayor and the police chief willing to buy into that. Otherwise, it is just going to become an excuse to spend more money on, bigger tools and not necessarily the human resources needed. And frankly, the institutional reform. Because with leadership excusing what's happening now, it's just very hard to expect that we're going to get real transparency.
Well, that's the thing that, I think pissed me off the most was seeing those statements yesterday from the chief and the mayor, because it was really a slap in the face to all of you guys, everybody who's been pushing for reform.
It's a slap in the face to the justice system in general. What they all tout as the greatest system in the world, as soon as it works in the favor of the public and not in the favor of their crony buddies, then all of a sudden it's called out as unjust, and it's like you can't have it both ways. Either we got the greatest system in the world, or we don't. And in this case, I think we got lucky. In many cases, you don't. We've got people sitting in prisons right now for nonviolent crimes, for simple possession, or things like that, and it's worked in their favor. And when I say in their favor, I mean in the police's favor for so many years. And now all of a sudden, when the one time that it convicts one of your fellow brothers in the criminal justice system is not that great. So yeah, I mean it's hypocritical. It's really terrible.
Yeah, it really is, and especially that they're really only looking to the system to reinforce violence use, because there are two police officers on the other side of this case that also thought Darby handled this wrong.
Yeah.
No support from the mayor there, no support from the chief. So yeah, it's really really unfair to those officers as well. But
we pointed out before the show, it's worth saying again, the two police officers that thought that he had done wrong are now unemployed police officers. So keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. I think that they, despite having more experience in the police force, have been essentially driven out for not following that cultural line. So yeah, it's a little concerning that with Police Chief McMurray continuing even after a verdict to say that Darby is innocent. I don't think normal citizens are afforded that same luxury.
Right, and that's something I wondered, if this was a rank and file City of Huntsville employee, someone driving a city truck and they got in an accident.
Yeah.
Would they get $125,000 of taxpayer money to defend them? Would they get public statements contradicting a jury verdict? So that's...
Yeah. If it was a garbage man
right.
that was out there picking up your trash that may have accidentally done something, would they support him the same way? I highly doubt it.
Yeah, almost certainly not. There would be a lot more talk about the state of that person's mind the day of than you get from the mayor about Darby.
Yeah, that's interesting if you say that. I wonder, because that probably would have been one of the first things that they rolled out was maybe this guy was on drugs, or maybe this guy, and I didn't hear any of that from the mayor on maybe this officer was on some type of mind-altering substance.
Yeah, no, nothing about his long history or public relations problems or coworkers who thought that he had issues. So yeah, I mean, there's the average city employee is not going to get that kind of defense.
Yeah.
And frankly, they'd be more transparent about what happened with the average city employee. The mayor has frequently said at city council that they're not going to comment on cases that are under active investigation or litigation. But here they are defending Darby seconds after the verdict comes out.
Right.
But we still can't get official comments on what happened with Alberta Rivas in South Huntsville or Bradley Pugh in 5 Points because they're under investigation.
So Chad, what do you have in terms of kind of where do we go from here? What are local activists pushing for, and do you have any sort of call to action for folks in the community?
For folks in the community, I would really encourage that you reach out to City Council. We just had the HPCAC report come out regarding the events of the Black Lives Matter protests in June 1st and 3rd. And so City Council is pushing a lot of proposals, and we're waiting to see who's going to unite behind those. So
right.
I think if you're a citizen of Huntsville, a big one that we're looking at is transparency with the body cameras. Right now, it's impossible to get them released from HPD, and the mayor's protected that. So, body camera footage should be a matter of public record. I mean, we're paying for these body cameras,
Right.
but no one can see what happens until Darby gets taken to trial. No one can see what happens in these other instances where people have alleged police abuse. So, I mean, I would encourage people to contact, especially about the body camera footage. I think that there needs to be more transparency there.
It's awful interesting that the police's mantra has always been, if you're not doing anything wrong, what have you got to hide? You know, this whole, whenever they pull you over and they want to go through your car or come knock on your door and they want to go through your house, the mantra is always, if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you have to hide? And I would turn it around and say the same thing to the police that don't want to release the body cam footage. If you're not doing anything wrong, what have you got to hide by releasing the body cam footage? That should exonerate you from all accusations. But it's very interesting that they're being so protective of a video. You know,
They want it both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're happy to point out that, you know, sometimes people do understand the situation differently after they've seen the video. But, you know, at this point, they've even withheld video from the oversight board.
Yeah.
So why are we paying for body cameras if no one in the city is allowed to see them, including people specifically tasked with oversight of the police?
Yeah.
And is it really an oversight board if you can't even get access to that?
Or interview the police. I mean, they've been refused, you know, to even be able to talk to the police. So.
Yeah, which again made no sense at all. Like they stopped the oversight board from speaking with anyone in HPD because they were worried about Fifth Amendment protections, but they used those same protections to try to stop evidence from coming out in the Darby trial.
Yeah.
So the city clearly understands how the ruling applies. They just aren't cooperating with city council when city council asks for these reviews.
Right. Well, Chad, what is there anything that you didn't get a chance to talk about this morning? Anything that you think we really need to know as we kind of wrap things up this morning?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing, if you haven't read the HPCAC report or any of the summaries, you know, Ashley Remkiss from AL.com did a great summary of what's in there. I think there's a lot of cultural problems in there, whether it's, you know, captains telling junior officers to turn off their body cameras while they were at the protest, or violence used against citizens. I would encourage people to go see what's in that report. You can find it at HuntsvillePoliceReview.com. Or again, there's great summaries out there from the media. And especially for like labor workers who would be concerned with things like the ability to strike. I think there's a lot of concern about how Huntsville is treating protests. And so I would encourage people to check that out if they haven't, because I think the problems are pretty evident, and it'll probably make you want to call your city council member.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we mentioned that as well, that what could be applied to a protest can be applied to a picket line.
Yeah,
so
thankfully we didn't see that protest bill out of the state go through this past week, because that's what I've told all my members is, you know, if this protest bill goes through and we just happen to be on a picket line and stop traffic, then all of a sudden we got a felony. You know, and that is not good whatsoever. So
right, and we already know, you know, how that law would be applied. It's not going to be applied towards the bosses and the scabs. So, thanks, Chad, for calling in. We got more on the other side of the break about teacher appreciation and the labor movement across the country. Thank you so much for joining us.
listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then follow us on social media. Facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report, Twitter @Labor Reporters, @JacobM_AL, and @Radical Unionist. If you missed part of the show and you want to go back and watch it later, search on YouTube for the Valley Labor Report. Please subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps, so to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We do have a website where you can buy our hats and our stickers at thevalleylaborreport.org. And if you appreciate our work and you want to keep us on the air, please consider throwing us a couple bucks on our patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.